Iran has gone almost entirely offline as authorities try to stem the spread of nationwide protests that have gripped the country since Friday. Another one. Yeah, remember how they ended the other ones? This time seems different. It involves way more cities, and isn't limited to any particular class or ethnicity. Unfortunately, the death toll is also a lot higher as the regime has been sending out IRGC, Basij and even Iraqi Shia militants to viciously attack the protesters. Over 200 people are reportedly dead, and this is only the fourth day of protests. What is really surprising me is the relative media silence compared to HK clashes. This is Iran. Many people are prejudiced and or don't know what they're talking about. I hope the protests lead somewhere. Civil unrest always leads to something. Both China and Iran has been going under certain financial pressure, but situation is far more fragile in Iran compared to China. Media will always be biased thought. If you don't watch the news, you are uninformed. If you do watch the news, you are misinformed. That's just how it is. Believe in none of what you hear, and half of what you see. Iranian living abroad here for about 4 years now. All lines of communications with our family members have been cut off for 3 days, but the videos my uncle sent, before they shut the internet down, showed huge protests in the city where we lived. The economic crisis that started after the revolution has gotten worse and there is no getting better in sight. I have been seeing people saying the gas prices there are cheap, and how people don't protest other things and only the gas prices have made them protest. First of all, when you live on low wages and everything you need to live on is expensive, how are you going to survive? Also, just because Western media doesn't report things doesn't mean it doesn't happen. There are tens of videos of protests that come out of Iran on a daily that show people protest, whether it's for women's rights, gas, or the truck drivers protesting their low wages. The government has ruined the country, and no, it's not all the West's fault. Taking what the authorities say over there as the ultimate truth is the first step towards going down a hole. With how oppressive the government is, I don't know how far the protests will go, since they also hired Iraqi militia to oppress the protests during the January protests, other than the oppressive Basij. I cannot wait to see this government fall. I will never forget what they did to my family, to me. Such regime that does not respect anything about its own people does not deserve to be in power. Just a bit of my take on the situation. I hope your family is okay. Honest question. Why does this get up votes, but if you said something of the sorts of praying for your family or thoughts and prayers out to you guys, it would be downvoted? Because Reddit is primarily atheists and agnostics, and a lot of people are irked by mention of religion. So mentioning prayers is generally not appreciated. Reddit atheists react to "I'm praying for you" the same way Christian nutjobs react to anyone who says happy holidays instead of Merry Christmas. God forbid anyone just accept well wishes in the spirit in which they are given. The death toll is currently anywhere from a couple to dozen to 100 plus. This is massive, don't let it die like the Chinese Muslims. Uyghurs. There are also the Hui Muslims in China. I can't find the source, but I read somewhere that the CCP was starting to go after them as well. Any strongly uniformitarian society will eventually go after any group which clings to an identity not derived from or controllable by the state/U/Atomic Robotman 0101. Think China got big mad after the Uyghur riots a decade ago. OFC, it's still inexcusable. Here's a list of the countries that are currently doing this, in part or full. Hong Kong, Bolivia, Venezuela, Iran, Iraq, Russia, Ethiopia, Mauritania, Sudan, Chad, Zimbabwe, Turkey, India, in Kashmir, Pakistan, in Balochistan, Egypt, Kazakhstan. Honestly, we take the internet as a human right in the West, but several countries routinely deny their citizens access to the internet in an attempt to control the narrative and discourage dissent. Edit, I forgot France, Chile, and Lebanon. It is almost like all those rebelling countries are self-aware of how they are getting screwed when they see how well things are going elsewhere and finally decided we are done with the BS. I think the internet pushed them from the suspect we are being cheated to the we have all talked to each other and definitely know now category. One of the reasons why governments want to clamp down on things like net neutrality. Giving the government more and more power is how oppression happens in these countries. You are better off with companies deciding things because your money influences them and they can't hold you at gunpoint. Net neutrality is not giving the government more and more power. It says that ISPs cannot decide what parts of the internet customers have access to, or charge different prices for different parts of the internet. What the customers do on the internet is up to the customers. It doesn't give the government anything, it gives people freedom of choice on the internet. The only people against net neutrality are greedy ISPs and morons. Does this have anything to do with the Iranian restart movement bots on Twitter? Is something going to turn Iran off and on again? CIA tried that, they booted a dictator, but it crashed with People's Revolution. Well, it was the US, together with the UK, who put that dictator there in the first place. The democratically elected Prime Minister Mossadegh nationalized the oil production. US and UK weren't having it, and instigated a military coup, leading to the regime of the Shah. The Shah was such an awful dictator that it led to the revolution, which was led by half theocrats and half socialists who united forces for the occasion, because the Shah was so awful. After the revolution the theocrats won. I won't be surprised if the West had a hand in that as well, because they'd prefer theocrats over communists. Had the US plus UK not overthrown a democratically elected government in 1953, the theocrats might not have been in power now. It's always about the oil. The spice must flow. Just one correction. Had the US plus UK not overthrown a democratically elected government in 1953, the theocrats would not have been in power now. I mean, I guess we will never know for sure, but Iran was definitely going the opposite direction of theocrats and religious government already. The rising communist, atheist, dissenters as well shows that. Increase gas prices by 50% to 300% in the US, and the reaction would be worse. Cough the 70s cough. Didn't think you'd be right, but a half-assed Google search says it quadrupled in the 70s. But that's over 10 years and a much smaller proportional amount of one's total income compared to Iranians. At the time the US was an importer of oil, the oil prices increased because of supplier action. Meanwhile Iran produces oil itself. Their problem is they can't sell it well. Sorry to sound like a noob here, but they sit on huge oil deposits. And nobody is buying oil from them after all the sanctions. Then why the hell are fuel prices rising in Iran? Crude oil has to be extracted, then refined and distributed. That costs. You can't run a gas/petrol engine on crude oil. Iran had massive petrol/gas subsidies with gas selling earlier at $1.10/gallon, $0.30 lit. Now their economy has gone to shit, and it can't afford those subsidies. But a lot of the blame/perception seems to be corruption, or just pain. One has to add for context that corruption in the Iranian administration is really a tradition of considerable proportions. So the perception is that wrong. This is why we need Elon Musk's internet satellites, so any government cannot monitor and/or censure your web access, since you will be talking to a satellite, and not your local internet service provider in the country that you reside. And we all know Elon Musk or his company won't be able to censor or monitor the traffic and access to internet over satellites. Problem solved. Oh, wait. Elon San can't even censor himself. I'm pretty sure he won't be falling into fascist tropes anytime soon. Having a private company's satellites as an option is better than none when the landline connection is cut off by your pose government. Finally someone speaks some sense. A billionaire would never sell out their personal morals for financial gain. Well, it's another point that has to fail. It can't hurt for people those places. Worst case they are not really worse off. I sincerely hope that when the lines of communication return, Iranians will be free and modern again. Iran is a modern nation run by fuckwits, but modern nonetheless. I don't know, man. Feel like these mullahs have influenced the culture way too much. My uncle tells me about how everyone is changing, people trying to screw each other over money whenever they get the chance, etc. One thing is certain. We need to boot them the F out of Iran. People trying to screw each other over money whenever they get the chance, etc. That's an awesome example. Definitely doesn't happen anywhere else. Have you considered that maybe this is because of the dire economic situation there? Force our women to be second-hand citizens? That's cool. Supply money and guns to terrorists? That's cool. Contribute to the killing of thousands in Iraq? That's cool. Government speaks about wiping the Jews off the continent? That's cool. Raise my gas prices? Fuck that. Time to protest? You can make similar lists for literally any country rioting. Nobody just wakes up one day and say, you know, life is pretty fucking great, but they did something bad, so now I'm gonna start lighting shit on fire and get killed by my government. Trying to make Iranians look like callous assholes just because this is a straw that broke the camel's back and started the riots is a really low blow, man. Well said.